Good afternoon and welcome to a CIEEM webinar on using ECOBAT to improve the interpretation of BAT acoustic surveys, intro to new and existing functions. This webinar will be presented by Fiona Matthews, who is the chair of the Mammal Society. Before I hand over to Fiona, and whilst we're waiting for everybody to join us, I'll just mention a few upcoming events that CIEEM have. So we've got our summer conference on health and wellbeing in the ecology and environmental profession, and that will be on the 4th of July in Birmingham. And we also have the Ecological Restoration and Habitat Creation Special Interest Group doing a conference on practical restoration and creation, lowland and upland grasslands, and that will be on the 19th of June in Chesterfield. These events can be found on the CIEEM website in the training and events area. We also have some upcoming training that might be of interest to you. So on the 25th and 26th of April, there's Surveying for Bats workshop. Oh, sorry, that's in workshop. And we also have Introduction to Bats and Bat Survey in Dunblane, Bat Impacts and Mitigation, again in Dunblane, Bat Handling and Identification in Canterbury, Introduction to Bat Ecology and Bat Surveys in Wareham, and BAT's Impact Assessment of Development, Mitigation and Enhancements, again in Wareham. And these can be found on our training and events area. Finally, we have another CIEEM webinar coming up on using bioacoustics for field survey, and that's on Friday the 10th of May at 12:30, and this can also be booked on the CIEEM website. Before I do pass over to Fiona, we'd just like to say there will be a chance to ask questions at the end of the webinar. We'll do a Q&A session, but please do feel free to submit your questions throughout the webinar. And there should be a Q&A button, which should be at the top of your screen or potentially at the bottom on a toolbar that you click on, where you just type your question in and then press send, and we'll receive those. Again, we'll do the Q&A session at the end. Without further ado, I will now pass over to Fiona. So thank you, Fiona. Hi, Fiona, are you there?
Hello, I'm here. I'm terribly sorry, I was on mute.
Oh, no problem.
Okay. Are you able to see my screen?
No. I've just stopped sharing, so if you share again, we should be able to view your screen. Yes, yeah, that's starting to work. Perfect, yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay, you can see that?
Yes, yeah.
Brilliant, okay. Right, so what we'd like to do in this seminar or webinar is give an overview of ECOBAT and basically describe how it can help you in understanding your BAT data and making better use of the information that you have. So I'm Fiona Matthews, I'm from the University of Sussex, I'm chair of the Mammal Society, and with me is Beth Smith, who is the Data and Information Officer at the Society, and who is the person who will have been answering queries if you've been in touch with us before about ECOBAT and has done a lot of the recent development work. Okay, so before we start, why do we need to do something about BAT data? I think increasingly we know that we're all collecting more and more data, and it's increasingly subject to scrutiny. I had this rather marvellous image courtesy of the Daily Mail after some work we did on wind turbines, and it was really the wind turbine work that provided the stimulus to thinking, actually, how do we need to be interpreting data, and how can we help other people present their data in a standardized way that means across the sector we know that when one person's talking about something, we all understand what that means. So it was a collaborative project, largely funded by NERC. We also work with the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, the Biological Records Centre, who provide the facility in the background to actually store information. The facility is hosted by the Mammal Society, and we do it free of charge. If you are able to hit our donate button at some point when you're using it, we'd much appreciate it. It helps us keep updating the system. And along the way, we've also had lots of help from BCT, the NBN, CIEEM, and also I'd like to mention Steve Markham from Marquis and Lord. And I'm sorry for the pop-up things that came up. Okay, so I'm sure that this sort of scenario is familiar to many of you. A massive increase in the amount of bat data we've been collecting, probably really since 2010, when we first started using things like SM2s and the more recent ANABATs. And I think very rapidly we went from using mini discs and so on, and transect data being the norm, to now thinking a lot more in terms of doing static acoustic recording with multiple units often. And alongside that, there's been massive advances in how we go about analysing the data. So there's now lots of systems available. I use Kaleidoscope, but many others are available to help us understand and interpret the files that we've got. And not only is that helping us to catalogue the data, but also there's a lot more use of auto ID to at least give a clue at what species we're talking about. It's not without its problems. I just picked up this one. This is a file recorded in Scotland. It claims to be Brandt's. It's utterly mysterious to me. It claims to be Beckstein, sorry. No idea why it's saying that. So it's certainly not replacing the job of the ecologist in being sensible in looking at the data. And, you know, there's lots of facilities available. There's lots of training courses. There's a Facebook group that I'd encourage you to join if you do a lot of acoustic analysis. So I think all the time we're improving and we're getting a lot better about understanding how to classify calls to species or to genus. But it seemed to me that there was then a big gap. Okay, so we've all gone crazy. We've spent 3 months doing nothing but sound file analysis. And then what? And, you know, it can provoke that existential crisis of, oh my God, I've got all this data, all this information, what am I then going to do with it? And very often, this is a ecological impact assessment that I just downloaded from the internet, so it's kind of anonymized, but I think it's fairly typical. I've done a lot of work of reviewing ECIAs, and this sort of thing is fairly typical of how those months of data that were collected at great expense are then reported. Nothing particularly wrong with what's said, I just think it's missing stuff, or it's missing opportunities. Okay, so the first thing that the study did is it said that they'd recorded more than 4,000 bat passes, and then they created something called the total bat activity index, which is based in bat pass rate per hour, and said that the rate is considered to be low. Okay, and then down at the bottom of the page, I don't know if there was a little, yeah, annotate. Can I draw? Yes, I can. Okay, so yeah, if we look at this, yeah, these are the sorts of typical tables where we've got something rudimentary about the amount of bat activity in each month at each detector. Ooh. Christy, sorry, is anybody able to tell me how I go back to the presentation? I started, oh, there we go. Right, oh God, I've now got blue circles on my beautiful presentation. All right, I may just have to ignore that. So we've come up with those sorts of things that says the rate is considered to be low. And the question for me is, okay, how do we actually know that that is low? What are we comparing to? And I did some work with Paul Lintott where we took a large number of ecological surveys and compared what people were describing as low, because very often we do resort to saying that things are low, medium or high activity. And this one particular report we picked out said the static bat detector recorded low levels of nocturnal activity in August and September. And I wondered whether we could just do a quick poll now, which I think that that Christy is about to do, which will let you tell us what you consider to be low levels of nocturnal activity. How many passes per night would you consider to represent low activity? So I think you should now be able to do that.
Okay, I'll give you a couple more seconds to make your choice. And okay, I'll end the poll now. Fiona, are you able to see the results?
Yeah, I am. That's perfect. Okay, so in this case, I would probably agree with thinking that 0 to 10 might reasonably be low levels, but obviously in some people's experience it's higher than that. The particular report we were looking at actually had 72 nocturnal bat passes a night, and we're ranking that as low. So I think what this can show you is that the experience of that ecologist is perhaps a bit of an outlier. So they're amongst, you know, the 5%, it's not an outlier, it's towards the upper end of the distribution of what people in this webinar would consider to be normal. Okay, and the point is that we all, when we do any sort of survey, we very much base our impressions about what is normal or what is high or what is low on our own experience. And our experience, hopefully, is also informed by the area that we're in. And that in itself can be a difficulty if you're a consultant who's used to working, I don't know, say in lowland Britain, and then suddenly you're off in a you know, maybe moving from a pastoral region to an arable region, or from a lowland region to an upland region. So if you're outside your comfort zone of where you normally work, in particular, it can be hard to make those judgments. So the solution, solution I'll come on to in a second. The other thing that happens to data is very often you get these sorts of tables, which really, you know, if you think of how much effort has gone into recording all that information, they're not all that informative. So that huge amount of data of 4,000 bat passes has been summarized into this, which is just an Excel, I think, an Excel bar chart split by species, but there's no indication there of what the variability is in the data. We've just got a single measure, which seems to be a measure of the mean bat activity, as in terms of the mean bat passes per hour over each of those months. So there's actually no indication in the report of what it is that's being reported, if it's the mean or the median. And the problem with that approach is that you've got all that massive amount of data, you've squished it right down into that one graphic with no indication of variability. And it can be that actually presenting data in that way, not only are you missing stuff, but it might actually be misleading. And so with Paul, I've written a little report about this, which is available freely for you to download if you want to. But you know, we're very conscious that for most biologists, part of the reason we became biologists and not physicists is that we didn't have a great love of maths. And so the purpose of ECOBAT is to try and make it easy for everybody to present data in a useful way without necessarily having to understand the minutiae of how to perform these calculations in the background. And just to give you a little example of why these things are important. So what most people would do, I don't know if you can, hopefully you can see my cursor on the screen. Most people would report the mean activity So this is some data from my own work on a wind farm. And if we tried to calculate mean activity for these bats, the result would actually be this blue line here. And the median would be this red one at the bottom. Okay. Now the issue with that is we've actually got a couple of really outlying data points. The data are not normally distributed, and if I can take you back to undergraduate days of battling with statistical distributions, when you're talking about a mean, it's only really meaningful if you've got normally distributed data. If you've got lots of outlying data like this, it can really skew what you're saying. So if we were to take out those two outlying values, then you can see that the mean and the median are actually really different. So the median, this is basically the most common thing that happens, whereas this line is, so basically we've just expanded this bit of the graph so you can see what's going on. The mean is really affected by the fact that we have some high values in the data set. Okay, so if you're wanting to give an impression of what generally is happening, then the median is a much better measure. And we also need to be mindful, though, that these outlying values might also be really meaningful when you're trying to interpret what's going on at your site. So if you are, for example, concerned that a development might be affecting a commuting route for greater horseshoe bats, it might well be that on most nights, activity, the number of horseshoe bats you record, could well be very close to zero. But it could be that on occasions, it might be that you've got a lot of activity along that route, perhaps because that happens to be the night where the wind is blowing in the correct direction, not maybe it's a particularly warm night, or animals are moving between a summer and an autumn roost, for example. Or similarly, if you're worried about species where there could be a high collision risk at wind turbines, say Leisler's bats, just reporting the mean or the median and forgetting that you've got these outlying values, again, could be really misleading, because perhaps it might be that what you need to know about are those occasional nights when the weather is particularly suitable on the top of some godforsaken moorland somewhere, and all the bats have actually gone up there to feed. And if you're just reporting what's going on average using these figures at the bottom, it might be difficult to explain that to a client, or even to recognise yourself that there are these days that are important. And finally, at the moment, I think we're missing a huge opportunity to do something good for conservation, and also do something good for conservation and development planning. So in the recent review that we've just done on the population status of British mammals, one of the things that's really obvious is that bats are extremely data poor. So if we look at this map, this is a map of nocturnal bats, and we've got massive gaps in the distribution for records. And I'm almost certain that we do have data there. It's just that it's hidden away in reports, it's locked away in places that then it can never be accessed, it can never be used. And similarly, I'm sure that a lot of you had the experience that I've had, where I've been standing in one field doing my survey for horseshoe bats, and I've just happened to see someone in the next field simultaneously doing another survey for horseshoe bats, but for different people, and we have no access to each other's data. And we can get very tangled up in issues around data sharing. And we can come to that a bit later on in the webinar about how we can deal with that. And at the very least, make the data, even if we, for reasons of client confidentiality, even if we can't put dots on maps, it might be possible to use the data at a larger spatial scale to fill in these sorts of maps here on the right, or it might be possible to use it in the background to create the sorts of algorithms that we're using in ECOBAT. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly run through the solutions and some of the tools that are available on ECOBAT, and then I'm going to hand over to Beth, who can take you through how actually to use the system. So the idea is it's a simple to use method, it doesn't require you to be a statistical genius, and it gives you information that is standardized and hopefully is helpful. And we're very open to feedback. We can alter things so that you're going to be able to, you know, if there's analyses that you would like to see that aren't there at the moment, we can probably write something to make that happen. So the first thing, that problem about how do I know whether BAT activity is high or whatever, well, the solution to doing that is, rather than just relying on our own experience, we take the data from our study site, the triangle here, and we compare it with what's known of BAT activity of that species in a similar geographical area. And the result of that is then we can say, okay, compared with other similar studies that have been done elsewhere, the amount of activity we've recorded here at this site is either completely average, so if it hits the 50%, which would be about here, it would be Mr. Average, or we can say it's higher or lower. So if you're on the 40th centile, then it means that 60% of other study sites have activity levels higher than those that you've reported, and 40% have activity lower than what you've reported. Okay, so if any of you have kids and you've done growth centiles with them, it's the same sort of thing. If your child's on the 98th growth centile, it means there's only other 2 babies out of 100 that are bigger than your baby on average. Okay, and you can produce little graphs like these. So in this case, this is 2 wind turbines, turbine 1 and turbine 2. You can see there's not a huge amount of difference between them. Turbine 2 looks like it's slightly higher. If you do want to read more, there's an open access paper that tells you a lot more about it there. So what are we comparing our study sites to? Well, we've got lots and lots of records in the background that people have already contributed to the data set. The system can only get better as more people use it. So not surprisingly, most of our data come in during the summer months with very little outside. These are just the different years of data. When we last looked at this was a couple of months ago. We had data from 450 locations over 1,500 nights, but that's going up all the time. And we're particularly pleased that the new Bats and Onshore Wind Turbines guidance points to ECOBAT and is encouraging people to use it, because basically the more people who put in data, then the more robust the comparisons can be. If there's very little data, basically it means that we have to make the comparison area quite wide. So that's something that you can test and you can play about with yourself. If there's very few comparison points, it would make sense to increase the geographical scope of your comparison. Conversely, if there's a lot of data available, you could compare within quite a small geographical region and just within the same months that you've been surveying for. So it's important to emphasise, you know, none of this replaces the sense and the critique of the ecologist. You know, these are just tools, and you have to look at, well, does this make sense in your particular circumstance? So quite a number of you, I know, have already been using ECOBAT and using the centile output. What we've done, though, is we've just added a whole load of new functions that we think are going to make it a lot more useful. So not just useful for strategic people in policy and planning, but should be more useful to ecologists on a day-to-day basis. So some of the outputs we've got is basically now when you upload your sound file data, what you do is you put in all your analysed records. So the sort of CSV file that comes out when you finish your kaleidoscope analysis or whatever you've done, where you've got each pass is labelled to species and it has a timestamp associated with it and a date stamp. You upload that, and these are the sorts of outputs you can get. So this, first of all, is just a really simple graphic showing you for all the different detectors that you had out, on each night, how long they were actively recording bats for. It allows you to look for gaps. So in this case, this is actually a battery died, and it's fairly obvious from seeing that. But also we can see that there are some nights where actually very little is going on, even though the detectors are functional, and that was synchronized across these sites, and that corresponds to nights of poor weather. So I think that's quite a nice thing then to be able to point out to clients. You can also put in outputs like the maximum pass rate per detector, and you could put in the median pass rate per detector. We've done this spatially. So this is a latitude and a longitude, and we've got a panel for each species with the numbers of passes represented by different sizes of blobs. And we could also change this to make this, rather than pass rate per night, we can make it pass rate per hour, which might be a better measure in some ways. You can also get out for each species graphics which show you, rather than that simple bar plot that I showed you from the environmental impact assessment I downloaded from the web, you can, this is just a more informative sort of report. So here we've got each of our static detectors in each month, and then we've got a box and whisker plot. So here the dots are showing you the outliers or the extreme values, which might be of interest and you might need to highlight. The bar shows you where the median value is, and the box is showing you the area over which 75% of your data points fall, and 95% of your data points will be inside these whiskers. Okay, so it's showing you basically the amount of variability. So we can see that the variability is a lot less for A3 in September than it is A3 in July, when there's a lot more variability in the data. You can also look at the distribution of your data across the night, and we've got a little heat map. So this is minutes after sunset here. And so basically sunset time obviously comes in as you move on in the year. And this is just a graph where the darker colours are showing you where most of your bat activity is concentrated. And then finally, you can also look at trying to interpret your data to see whether it's likely that where you've put it is close to a roost. So what we've done is taken the emergence times from John Russ's book for each species, and then plotted the bat activity relative to these times. This is time after sunset along the bottom. So you can see that for common pipistrelle, we've got one pass there that looks like, well, possibly it's fallen within the likely emergence time, but the vast majority of the data are well away. Similarly for noctules, it doesn't seem likely that this detector is very close to a roost. It's just that these bats are actually coming into the site after some time after they've emerged. And there's also an output which is specifically for the maternity season, so it's looking at just at the subset of data in the maternity season. So if we look here, common pipistrelle, I think we can be quite confident that this is not very close to a maternity roost. Of course, it doesn't mean necessarily the site is unimportant, but it's just giving you an extra piece of evidence to play with. Okay, so I'm going to pass over to Beth now about how to actually get your data into ECOBAT and get your reports out.
Okay, great. So I've just got a, can you hear me, by the way, Fiona?
Yeah. Okay,
just checking. So I've just got a 5-ish minute video that just takes you step by step through how to actually use ECOBAT. So we sort of broke it down into 5 processes. So you've got, we have a proforma to download from the website, and I'm just going to take you through it if it wants to play.
It wants to play.
Oh,
yeah.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, so basically you go onto our website, if you click on the proforma link, it will automatically download the Excel file. Just open it up. Which looks like this, and essentially it has all of the information. If you hover over the, it's not very clear, is it? If you hover over each title, it will tell you if it's required or whether it's optional, and like the type of information that we require in that field. It does have to be exactly as it's specified, otherwise your data won't upload properly. But the ones which are fussy like this, they do have drop downs, so you should be able to input it correctly. For those of who already, what's happening? See if this works. So I'm going to go back. I'm just going to pause it here. For those of you who already used the website and have used the old version, you previously could put in any type of spatial reference system. So you could put in a grid reference, or you could put in latitude and longitude. We've actually asked for it now. I've just gone past it on here, but as latitude and longitude in 2 separate columns. So just be aware of that. That's the major change between the forms and when you upload the data. And we're asking for it in decimal degrees, just because we had quite a few problems when I was mapping out the data with the reference systems being inputted incorrectly, and we weren't picking it up on the system. So just to make it a bit more foolproof, that's now in place.
Can I just come in? Also, if you're storing data on Excel, then decimal degrees seems by far the easiest way to record your grid references. So yeah, if you please do that. Also, if you've used the system before, you'll remember that you used to have to upload nightly summaries of how many bat passes of each species you'd had per night. And what we're doing now is we've changed that, so literally you can just upload your data as it comes out of your analysis system. So you basically put in each row of data is each one of your bat passes.
Yeah, and just in case anybody struggles putting in a minus number in the longitude, in case it thinks that you're trying to put in an equation, if you put in an apostrophe before you type anything, then it'll treat it as text. Just helpful hint. Let's go back to this. I'm just going to flick through again. So you can see there we've got the latitude and longitude with an example of how it needs to be inputted, and also with a website to gridreferencefinder.com. So if you have used a grid reference, you can go online and easily convert it in that website. Come on. So there's other information on the end. Some of you will be familiar with it. It is optional. If you don't use it, please leave it blank, like this. So here's one I made earlier, Blue Peter style. And please save it as a CSV before you upload it as well. So then to get back onto the website and upload it, it's just data input. Choose the file that you need to upload. It will ask you the bat pass definition that you used. So you can just input this here, and sensitivity of data, so whether you don't want it publishing or not. And then just to make sure that everything's mapped correctly, so that we're actually taking the information from your spreadsheet that we think, just make sure your columns match with what it should be. Yeah, so just go through and check. The ones that were left blank should be not imported. So if any of them have a value in, like this one, which says linear feature adjacent, I left that blank, so that actually needs changing to not imported. Again, it won't work otherwise. And then just double check it. Depending on how much data you have, it can take a little while to upload. I did speed this up. And it will tell you whether or not your upload was successful. If it wasn't, it will give you a link to download the data again. So now you can go to the analysis part of the website, and it will bring you to your data that you just uploaded and all of your records previously. Sometimes there is a bit of a lag in the system, so you can see it took a second there for my new data to show up, which is this last row. And then if you click Analyze, I don't know if you want to explain this, Fiona.
Yeah, so basically you can set whether you're going to just look at data that was recorded in a similar time to you, which is the bit at the top, the plus or minus 30 days, and whether you're going to try and look within a similar geographical region. And I know that for some of you, you're going to think 100 kilometres, that's quite a long way. That's something we'll be able to bring down as more data get into the system. And it might be that if you're in some areas, like you can use it, for example, in Northern Ireland, but there's not a lot of data available, so you might want to just remove the geographical filter altogether and just say, okay, compare this with everything that you've got in the entire data set, and it's at least better than nothing. And then the other bits and bobs, like the detect and make and your analysis software, it's optional for you to upload it. We've got it all in there because, you know, we've had lots of discussions from people saying, well, actually, I'd rather compare, I don't know, only full spectrum recordings, for example, rather than with zero crossings. At the moment, I don't think it is making enough of a difference, and we don't have enough data really to let us separate at that level, but we're collecting the data now so that then in the future it would be possible to run filters on those sorts of values as well.
Okay, great. So just for testers, I just ran this without a filter. And if you click analyze, and basically just to explain why this is now split into two. So the new upload is the within night data. So that's what we're focusing on from now onwards. But just if you already have your old uploaded data in the system, then you can use the per night data analysis. I'm not sure if that was very clear. It just that when you click download the report, it downloads a new CSV. And then you can click on to generate the within night and data analysis report. It might take a second to load sometimes. Yeah, and then you can upload this new CSV that has just been downloaded, because this includes your percentile data.
So just to say, what it's doing in the background is it's generating information, or it's clawing information which is held in the Biological Records Centre of all the other data that was within the parameters that you'd selected. So like all the data that was in 100 kilometres of your site within 30 days. So it's whirring and squeaking in the background, which is why there's that little delay, and then why you have to upload it, go through this process of clicks to make the report run.
Yeah. I have speeded up some of the video as well, so it might take a while to generate certain downloads for people depending on how much data you have, so just be aware of that. It is working. Where's the play? Oh. Okay. Start again from here. So upload the new data into the application. You can insert an author name and a site name. If you don't, it'll just come up as NA. It's not necessary. And it's as simple as generating the report. You will see in the bottom of the screen, it does tell you it's building the report. So if it is taking a while, it's there, it's doing something. It will eventually download like so.
When we say take a while, we're not meaning hours, by the way. We're just meaning
just not instant.
Things that you'll generate multiple reports.
Yeah. So those inputs come up at the top of the report, and this is what it will look like when it generates, depending on what data you have.
So it's all in a Word document, and the reason we put it in a Word document is so that you can edit it and cut and paste and format your tables in whatever your own house style is. Whereas if we'd produced it in a PDF or something, we could have made it a bit prettier instantly, but then it would have been much more difficult for you to manipulate.
Yeah. So I didn't bother showing all of the report, so that is the end of the video. Just because it's, what is it, 46 pages long. I'm sure you'll all be generating reports after this and seeing it for yourselves. So that's me done.
Okay, so Christy, that's us finished. Christy, are you there?
Hello, sorry, I was talking to myself there. I forgot I muted. That's great, thank you so much. If you stop sharing, I'll go back to my screen and just say a few words before we start the Q&A. So, I can do that here. Okay, so we've had a few questions submitted already, and if you have any, please do feel free to submit them now. Before we start the Q&A, just so you know that you can record this webinar using the below competencies, so design and preparation of habitat species management, enhancement plans and projects, or environmental impact assessment. And if you are a CIEEM member, we have the CPD tool where you can record this and use those competencies. Okay, so we have some questions already, so I will ask them now. So James asks, I've downloaded the Proforma. The one available on the website currently doesn't seem to have drop-down lists for any of the fields. Is this the correct version?
It should be. I'm just checking if it works on mine because it did yesterday. So not all of the fields have drop downs, but for example, species should. So I just downloaded it and it works for me. I'd be interested if it's still not working. So I think it's the ones that have to be yeah, so species, sensitivity, past definition, detect and make, and then the linear features. If James wants to email me later on if it's still not working, then that's fine.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Beth.
Is that okay?
Yes, yeah, that's great. So Ruth also asks, if I have understood correctly, the software cannot be downloaded and used independently from the website.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's a web-based tool rather than a software.
Okay, fab, thank you. Alan asks, I use Analog and often lump passes into 5 or 15-minute blocks. Can data in this format be uploaded?
That's an interesting question. It might be that what would have to happen is, so I guess I need Alan to tell us whether for the 5-minute block, presumably then he's getting a total count of, say, how many pipistrelle passes are within that 5 minutes.
I definitely can't do anything for the within nightly analysis.
You could use it for the centile analysis, because that's just requiring the total numbers per night. It would be possible for Alan to do something himself to make something that's equivalent in Excel. So basically what he would need to do is basically, if say there's 5 pipistrelle calls between 9:20 and 9:25, if he could give them all the time 9:20 and create a row for each pass, that would then work. But at the moment, yeah, we wouldn't otherwise be set up to upload it in chunks like that. It'd be interesting to know if many other people do the same and whether they don't have access to the underlying raw data. Is maybe
Okay.
would you put that up as a poll, Christy, quickly? Is that possible?
I don't think I can, I'm afraid. I need to edit them prior to the webinar, but we could ask the question in the feedback form.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Great, thank you. Ruth says, does the website keep a copy of the data uploaded?
Yeah, so basically the data are stored in the Biological Record Centre, and when you upload the data, you basically click a box that either says, I don't want this information ever to be shared with anyone, or it says, yes, I'm happy for it to be shared. And by shared, what we mean is basically passed to NBN and from there to local biological record centres. Obviously, what we don't want to do is people submitting data multiple times to the same organisation. So if you upload to ECOBAT, the data will then find its way to the local record centres. But it's basically your choice, and you can go back and if you previously locked your data, you can subsequently unlock it. So for example, we'd really encourage people, if they've got an issue when they first upload the data because of client confidentiality agreements, but then actually the report has now been through the planning process, etc., and you're free to make it available, it'd be brilliant if you could unlock it.
Great, thank you, Fiona. We've got another question. For wind farm sites, is there a requirement to deploy a detector at each wind turbine, or could representative data be used, less detectors on similar habitat types, for example, survey habitat?
Yeah, okay. So for that, so I see that's a question from the Republic of Ireland. You might be interested to have a look in the new bats and wind farm guidance for Great Britain that's just come out. If you Google it on Scottish Natural Heritage website, or even just Google wind farm bats guidance, it does come up. And the decision that was made, at least for now, is only to have a detector per turbine for very small sites, and at larger sites, they're, you know, for pragmatism, really. The idea is to cover a range of habitat types within that site.
Thank you. Can this tool be used in the Republic of Ireland?
Yeah, yeah, it can. So at the moment, you know, my only caveat is at the moment we don't have, I think we may only have one file upload or something from the Republic of Ireland, but please use it, because then if you use it and other people use it, then it starts to become useful.
Great, thank you. Georgina asks, is the within 30 days option in only the year you collected the data, or within that time frame over all years?
At the moment, it's all data in the same month and across years. In the future, when more data are available, we'd be looking to make that a within year thing. It's just at the moment, if we made it, and obviously, you know, we all recognise that there's some years like 2012 when it just rained all summer. So it might be, if you're working within a year and this year is particularly bad for some reason, you would have to include that as a caveat in your report and say, well, this is compared with what's happening usually across all years within the data set.
Great, thank you. Joanne asks, have you identified any limitations with ECOBAT?
I'm not quite sure. Not quite sure what limitation she has in mind.
I mean, we're always working on it.
Yeah.
Have different graphs, different outputs that they want showing. It's something I can definitely work on. But yeah, limitations as a whole, I think everything always has a couple.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Thank you Alini says, hi, thank you for this very useful presentation. I would like to ask if the output of Anabat, Swift, or any other software except Kaleidoscope can be used.
Yeah, yes, is the short answer. And I see in the chat also Derek Allen asked whether the output CSV file from Kaleidoscope is in similar format. So we've tried to use a format that should be generic, and literally when you put in the data, what the system will ask you to do is basic, or when you look at the pro forma, you'll see that the columns are labeled things that are very similar. And when you do the upload process, you can actually match your own file names to, so say for some reason your particular software calls it date 1, okay, and we want it actually to be called date in our CSV file. You can just do a drop down menu and it'll pick out the columns that it thinks are the correct ones. Is date 1 what you're meaning when we're looking for date, so you can match. It sounds a bit complicated when I'm saying it out loud. Actually, it's really easy when you're doing it in practice. And if you get any problems, just let us know, drop an email or something, and we can talk you through how to do it.
Thank you. Adele asks, could you please run through the difference between within night and between night analysis?
Yeah, okay, so basically all the analyses that we can run now, so if you upload all of your complete data where we've got information on a minute by minute basis, which we're describing here as within night, it gives you all of the outputs that we showed you today. So you can look at things like the distribution of your passes across the night. It'll also do those centile comparisons of comparing your sites with the other sites. If, on the other hand, you've only inputted nightly data, and we don't have any information on how that data was spread in the night, we don't have those individual passes, then the only thing we can do for you is to give you the centile output. So initially when we set up the website, that was the only thing we were offering. We were only offering the centile output, and so people were just uploading nightly summaries of their data. So what we're saying now is we've kept the potential to use those nightly summaries, mainly for people who've already put data in and might want to use it again. But what we'd recommend is that everybody now just puts in, basically it's kind of their raw data, their pass by pass information, and then you can get the whole lot out.
Thank you. Liat says, apart from user-generated data, did you say that ECOBAT also utilises BAT distribution data from biological record centres?
It doesn't, but thank you for the suggestion, Liat, because what we could do is we could certainly link to the new maps that we've produced on the population review of British mammals, because we've done a lot of work on cleaning those records and have reasonably robust models now of what we think the distribution of each species is. So we could upload those as an automatic output of the report, and then they're in a nice format that you might want to, we could put, for example, where your location was on top of a map of the distribution of the species across Great Britain, if that's of interest. Of course, we wouldn't be able to do that for Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland at the moment because we don't have those same maps.
Great, thank you. Jason asks, can you confirm the data file types to upload, i.e. are they the Anabat files post ID added?
Yeah, so what we're wanting is for you to upload your final analysis of what you consider each pass to be. So not just an auto ID. I hope that answers that. I hope that's the question he was asking.
Great, thank you. Georgina asks, how is the data subject to freedom of information? If you select high sensitivity, so not published, would anyone be able to see that data still?
No, they wouldn't. And because the Mammal Society is a charity, this is partly why we moved it there and out of the university, because it's a charity, the charity isn't subject to freedom of information requests.
Perfect, thank you. Are you envisaging that ECOBAT will be used for all types of development?
Yeah, so initially it was prompted by our work on wind energy, but yeah, it could be used for any sort of development. And actually I was chatting a couple of weeks ago with Natural Resources Wales about just that, and you know, wondering whether it could be something that's pointed to in the new bat mitigation guidelines.
Great, thank you. Does this only work for static detectors, or can transect data be used?
At the moment, it's only static detectors, and that's basically because of the volume of data that's generated is so much greater. So yeah, our focus is statics.
Great. Is there a detailed explanation on ECOBAT of what all the different output figures mean and how they are calculated, etc.?
Yeah, so on the output file, there is information on there, and so for example, we do give the means, but we have a little textual note underneath of saying why we would recommend that you use the median instead, and with a link to relevant papers that you might want to cite in your report.
And I'm yet to put things on the website, so the help documents will be going on the website, and hopefully by tomorrow. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Do you intend to do any large-scale analysis of the data set you are accumulating?
Sorry, we missed one. We missed Aaron. But in answer to that one, ultimately, yes, that would be really useful if we could make the data work better to understand things like the distribution, or to look at habitat associations, that sort of thing. Yeah, that would ultimately be fantastic. Yeah, and it's partly about making, you know, if we were to think about all the money that's spent collecting bat data, that at the moment, essentially after that report is about thrown in the bin, it just seems almost criminal. And I'm sure that that almost everybody on the line would agree that we've got massive knowledge gaps for bats. So if we can collectively use that to fill some of those evidence gaps, that'd be a really worthwhile thing to do.
Great,
right.
Thank you. Yeah.
So the no data nights is an interesting issue that we are still wondering how to deal with. It's something that the problem is that we would need to find a format for people to tell us about nights where they recorded absolutely nothing. So at the moment, if you've got at least one pass of any bat, we be on that night, but the way of dealing with complete zeros. One thing we were thinking of doing is at least being able to put up a figure which shows how many nights of zero data you had and how that compares with others that people have uploaded. So it would be zero for that species where at least one other species was recorded. So the short answer to that question is it's something that we're thinking about. I think in a lot of cases it won't actually materially affect the conclusions. It's only likely to be an issue on really, really low activity sites where there's an awful lot of zeros, and then on the nights where there is activity, it's enormous. So it's something that we're working on, and it's a combination of being a logistical issue of getting that data from people and what format that should be in, and then there are second associated statistical issues with it as well.
Perfect, thank you. We are approaching 1:30. Would you like to carry on with the questions or stop there?
I can, I don't mind.
Yeah.
If you want to keep going.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So a question from Claire. Please could you provide details of the 2 journal articles again, as I didn't get the full details jotted down in time. Thank you.
Yeah, we can actually upload those to the ECOBAT website and then they'll be there.
I can do that right now.
Great, thank you. Nicholas asks, am I correct in thinking the column-headed reference range size indicates the total number of different sites used for comparison?
Beth, that's correct, isn't it?
Reference range size. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Tyson asked,
I think it's the number of nights that's compared to.
Yeah, so it's a number of site nights, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, not just the number of sites.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Tyson asks, if I were to use data from outside of the UK, could I still use ECOBAT, selecting no geographical area? Would this then compare the data from each of my own detectors?
Okay.
Technically, yes. But it's the species that you have are probably not likely programmed into ECOBAT. So I imagine you wouldn't be able to upload or analyze the data.
We could potentially extend the species range.
Yeah.
I don't think that would be very difficult to do. At the moment, there's not a facility for people just to select their own detectors for comparison, but I guess it's something that would be possible to do. So at the moment, if you select no geographical range, it'll just compare it with everything in the data set. If you see what I mean. So by a geographical range, we mean honing down to say 100 kilometres or 200 kilometres.
Yeah, but for someone who, if they chose 100 kilometres and there is no other data, it will compare it to your own records.
Yeah, so actually rather than selecting no geographical range, you want to select a geographical range and just make it small. Yeah, and then if it's only you, it'll just compare with your own data.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Can your data be downloaded by anyone else or just by yourself? My back group generates income by sale of records and may not use this. The data could be downloaded by other parties.
Yeah, the data are not downloadable.
Great, thank you. Can BAT passes recorded during transect surveys use this tool, or is the output not relevant?
No, so we're only dealing with static surveys.
Great, thank you. Lynn asks, where comparison data with other sites within X kilometres is requested, does the system tell you how many other sites were involved and or their locations?
What it tells you is the site night, so that's the comparison. It doesn't tell you their locations. We did think about that, and somebody had also asked if they could know the identity of the person who'd uploaded data so that they could kind of give them a ring. We think we might run into data protection issues if we do that. So at least for now, we are going to keep it as anonymous. But it could be something that potentially we can look at going forward if we're getting a lot of feedback that there's a need for that.
Great, thank you. Can you explain a bit more about the pass intervals, please?
So it wasn't the pass interval, it's the pass definition. So different people don't necessarily always use the same definition of a back pass. So it gives you some options that you might be using. For example, it might be a stream of records and each pass is defined by an interval of a second or more of silence between the stream of sound. So it just gives you some definitions so that people can then understand a bit more about whether they're doing a like-for-like comparison.
Great, thank you. David asks, could the activity centiles analysis also be used to compare roost data for a site with other neighbouring roosts? E.g., do I have a small, medium or large pit roost for the area, assuming data was submitted to enable this?
So it doesn't, in the current format, we can't do that because we're or could you? Could you do it by uploading a nightly summary and treating that as, I mean, the problem for us is at the moment, if somebody were to upload something on the nightly summary and put in the total numbers of bats they'd seen emerging from a roost, and then do it again for lots of roosts, the problem is that we wouldn't then know that that wasn't numbers of passes and it was actually numbers of bats that you'd seen. Having said that, it's probably fairly straightforward for us to replicate the system so that we then could do exactly the same thing for roosts. So really interesting idea. I think it's something that would be good to do as an add-on.
Perfect, thank you. Matthew asks, have you built this using R Shiny?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a mixture of R Markdown and Shiny.
Perfect, thank you. Could you clarify what the reference range is in the report? Is it the number of other nights that our data is being compared to? Is there any way of finding out how many sites this data has come from?
Okay, so that's what we were answering before. So it's the number of site nights.
Okay, fab. Fiona, can you see these questions as well on your screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I don't want to duplicate any. Can the system be used for transect data?
No.
Okay.
And just going up to Tyson about using different makes of static detectors simultaneously. Yeah. You can use them. I mean, for the moment, because we're trying to place the output data in kind of a regional context, we're assuming that the variability between detectors will be relatively small compared with the variability between different sites in the region. So if you like, we're saying, we're recognizing that the differences between detectors, and in the fullness of time, when there's a lot of data in the system, you'll be able to select what detector you want to compare your information to. But for now, we're assuming that it's reasonable for people to use the whole data set should they want to.
Perfect, thank you. And guidance, we've been over that. There'll be some on the website, is that correct?
Yeah, it's something that we should be able to help with, yeah.
Perfect. Is there any way to check the availability of data in a particular area, for example, Northern Ireland?
Yeah, so I can tell you for Northern Ireland, because I know, because I did some work there myself recently, we don't have much data for Northern Ireland at the moment. Of course, that doesn't stop all the other outputs still being useful, like the distribution of calls across the night. It's only the centile information that won't be as useful at the moment. And what I would say is, if there are people in the Republic and Northern Ireland, please encourage your colleagues to use the system, because it doesn't take that much data to be inputted for it to start to be useful for everyone.
Great, thank you. Is there any way to delete the uploaded data sets ourselves yet, or do we still have to request for them to be deleted?
Yeah, this is, I'm afraid at the moment you still have to request them to be deleted, and that's because it's not, the data aren't physically stored by us, they're hosted within this NERC community warehouse at the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, the Biological Record Centre, so it has to go into their system, so it requires some particular sort of coding to do that, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. If the data isn't shared, does it still add to the ECOBAT algorithm?
Yeah, it does. So that's the beauty of it, that even if you can't actually share your data, you can still make the system better that's running in the background. So it makes everybody's comparisons of bat activity more robust.
Great, thank you. Nicholas asks, if our data is used to help build your database, is there a minimum length of time of data sets, 1, 2, 3 or more nights, that you accept? Apart from inherent variability due to weather, is it worthwhile submitting one night's data?
Yeah, we can take everything. We can take everything because basically, you know, one of the advantages of the system data.
Sorry, Fiona, we've lost you there.
Yeah.
Hello? Oh, Fiona, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can now, yeah.
Okay, so yes, you can upload a single night's data and it's still useful.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
I can't analyze less than 5 nights. That was set up in the initial code. I believe there's a reason for that, but not being a BAT person. Apparently, you're only supposed to analyze it if you have more than 5 nights worth of data.
That's, Beth, I think that's just for looking at the distribution of calls across the night. It shouldn't affect the centile calculations.
It was in the initial percentiles code. Yeah.
Oh. There's no reason for that.
It.
Yeah, there's no reason for that. I think we can fix that.
Okay.
Okay, that was a useful question then. Thank you.
Yeah. Perfect. Do all calls need to be coded to species? I have data sets where I've only coded my target species, and analysis of this single species would be useful.
There's a pause while I'm thinking about this. We may need to get back to Tilly, to whoever that was on that one. I need to think about what the implications are.
That was anonymous, so we don't
have.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the implications because the problem is that then we might end up inferring zeros for other species.
Okay.
Okay, maybe we can post something on our website in answer to that.
Perfect, thank you. Tilly asks, is it possible to set up an annual auto reminder email to go back and change sensitivity of data?
Oh, that's a really good suggestion, thank you. We'll look into how we can do that.
Great, thank you. Gwen asks, if you already send data to Record Center, presumably best to choose the do not share option, otherwise data goes in twice.
Yes.
Okay. Annika asks if the tool can be used on Channel Islands data.
Yeah, so again, it's as with Tyson's question earlier, yes, it can. We might have to think about whether we need to add any species, but yeah, it can be used. It's really just a question of encouraging people in your region to use it. And this is something actually I've just been chatting about at EuroBATS, about whether it could have a broader application across the whole of Europe.
Okay, thank you. We are approaching 1:45 and we have 32 questions left. Would you like to carry on answering them, or I could send these questions to you and send the responses back to the attendees? Fair.
I don't mind. I'm happy to stay. I still see we've got 139 people with us, so if people are still interested, I'm happy to keep going.
Okay, yeah, that's fine by me.
If we see the number of people falling off a cliff, then we know that.
Yeah, if it gets to 0, maybe we should end. Okay, Nicholas says, I missed a bit about the new style data input. I submitted data a week ago in the old format. Can I get a new style report for this?
Right. What we'd need is actually to have the data that shows the individual timestamps for each of your calls, because otherwise we can't give you the output on things like the distribution of your back calls through the night. So if you'd like to re-upload, I suggest if you drop Beth an email and say, I want to upload my new data, can you delete my old data? Then we'd be able to get you a new report.
Thank you. In your examples, you put all myotis bats together. Will it accept individual species?
Yes, it will. It will. I think the only thing to be mindful of is when you come to do your centile output, so it's comparing you with everybody else in the data set, you just need to apply a bit of thought when you're thinking about how to interpret those for individual species. So say you have uploaded what you consider to be Brandt's calls, you might
Sorry, Fiona, we've lost you again. Oh, yeah, we've got you back. No?
Okay.
Yes?
Yeah, I was just going to say that for some myopia species, a lot of people will probably upload to genus rather than to species. So you just need to be mindful when you're doing your comparisons on the centiles that you might not have a lot of data to compare to.
Okay, thank you. Does the software now treat inputted species groups as separate? Rather than adding all calls?
You can put them in separately. There's also the option to put them in as pipistrellus spur if you want to.
Yeah,
Right.
I think what she means is before it used to group them, so it would put a pipistrellus species as the output would be all of your pipistrellus species, even if you specified them, whereas now you've left it separate. So the output you get for pipistrellus species is just the ones that you classified as pipistrellus species.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. When doing a spatial comparison, can you see how many sites of data it's used for comparison?
Okay, so this is the same question. So it's site night.
Okay. This is quite a long one. I used ECOBAT on a project this year. It's a long-term project. The report won't be submitted until 2020. We won't be collecting more data over this time. Would you advise RE running the data through ECOBAT due to changes to ECOBAT and potentially more data in ECOBAT that might change the results of the outputs?
Yeah, I think if you've got time to do it, it's worth rerunning it, but please let us know so that we know to delete the original data set that you uploaded.
Perfect, thank you. Adele's question, I think we've answered that one.
Answered that.
If I understood well, data are analysed per night. However, night length varies within the year. Is there an option for analysis of data per hour?
Yeah, so this is something that we're thinking about, and actually, yes, we're going to change it so that you will also have the per hour option.
Great, thank you. If we are happy to share the data, does it get used before it's vetted by the Record Centre? How do you ensure species IDs are reasonably accurate? Okay,
so we don't do any vetting at this stage. What happens is once it's shared with the NBN, it will then go through the normal record cleaning process. Which means being accepted by local verifiers, but that's not something that's done directly by us.
Okay, thank you. Can the outputs be put into commercial ecology reports, provided the website source is referenced correctly?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there scope to include habitat type in the data input?
The only thing we have in at the moment is whether the detector was on a linear feature or not, which is partly to allow us to pick up outliers, which might be because a particular detector just happened to be on a commuting route. We're thinking about ways that we could work with something around habitat in the future. So, for example, by combining the outputs with something like the land cover map, to give outputs based on habitat. We decided not to ask individual users to upload habitat data just because we were a bit concerned about the variability in how people are recording habitat, and also about the extra time it would take for people to do that. So we're trying to really keep the input as simple as possible.
Great, thank you. Does ECOBAT connect to online weather data sets to give a summary of weather conditions during your surveys?
No, it doesn't.
It's on my
Okay.
list of things to do, though.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. How did you get Shiny to work with R Markdown?
That might be easier answered if Elliot contacts me separately. It's
Okay,
code that
Yeah.
I can send over.
great, thank you. Is there simple, Andrew asks, is there a simple explanation of what the data will be used for that can be provided to clients to aid their decision in whether to allow their data to be shared?
I'm not sure whether that's something. So we have definitely written this. Beth, I'm not sure if that's currently on the website or if that's one of the things you're uploading today or tomorrow.
No, it's in the data sharing. So if you, on the website, on the menu, if you click on About ECOBAT and then Data Sharing, it basically tells you the different options and the terms and conditions and for what we can use the data for.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you. Does your database for comparisons include the BTO Norfolk BAT survey data?
Yes, it does.
Great. Some of the data I have recently analysed using ECOBAT classed 6 common pipistrelle passes per night as a high level of activity. Does this mean that there is very little data within the geographical range, or that most of the data held by the website is for very few passes?
That's a bit surprising. I think maybe the best thing is maybe if Patrick would like to contact us separately about that and we can have a look at exactly what's going on, because that does look a little bit unexpected.
Okay, thank you. Will the option to input nightly data remain if percentile analysis is all that is required, or does all data have to be entered within night in future?
Okay, so this is something where we're actually interested in having some feedback, and maybe we can put that on the feedback form from this webinar.
Yeah.
In a sense, for us, it's easier if everybody uses the same system, but at the moment we've got the two running side by side to meet the people who only want one bit of it.
Actually, the within night has been hidden. Sorry, the per night is hidden on the website, but if people want to upload their data that way, I can provide the link and I can put it back online as well.
Okay, thank you. How do you define a BAT pass for each data point?
Okay, so that the user needs to look at the pull down menu and decide which, if any of those options matches with what they're doing.
Great, thank you. Are there any checks in place to ensure reliability of data?
No, that's something that's really outside the scope, and the only way really we can deal with that is by the total amount of data that we have, that we accept that there might be some noise, there might be some people who are not bringing in species, but if you're comparing with thousands of calls, then, you know, submitted by lots of different users, then hopefully overall it's still coming out with something meaningful.
Thank
Can I
you.
suggest we maybe just take another 3 and then stop?
Yeah, that's fine, no problem. Shall I just go in order, or are there any ones specific?
Yeah.
So for the likelihood of passes near a roost, are emergence times per species already in ECOBAT? Can these be customed?
Okay, so that's part of our code in the background. Beth, what do you think?
You currently can't customize it now. If there's a specific reason, then I can personally change it and send you a separate report, but you won't be able to do it online.
Okay, thank you. Do you have an example of an output report for us to look at and show colleagues?
Yeah, and we could put one up we could put one up on the website.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm going to get on with that this afternoon.
Great, thank you. So we'll make this one our last question. Are you looking at upscaling this software to other countries? For example, South Africa currently has many wind farms, with many more being planned.
Yeah, so exactly, you know, and similar to the discussions around Eurobats, I don't see any reason why the same system couldn't be applied and upscaled. Really, it's just trying to find some finance to actually make the changes happen. You know, it's not technically all that difficult. It's literally just finding some time to pay for the bits of code to be written. So if anybody's interested and wants to come back to us with suggestions about how we can make this more broadly applicable, we'd be really pleased to chat to you about that. I was just seeing one more further down.
Yeah, sorry, we've lost you again. Fiona?
Submitting, can we analyse combined data for different species like the nyctaloid bats? And the answer is yes.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so we'll leave the Q&A there then. Yeah, thank you so much for staying on to answer those questions. And yeah, thank you to those who are still with us. We have recorded this webinar, so we'll upload it to the CIEEM website if you did want to rewatch it. And we will also be sending out a feedback survey this afternoon, and we'll add in a few of those questions that Fiona mentioned to that. So yeah, we'll end the webinar there. Thank you to Beth and Fiona. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. And thank you to everyone for joining. And yeah, we hope to see you at a future CIEEM webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye. Bye.